Hello and welcome to the iCHIEFS podcast series, brought to you by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. This is where we share new and exciting information that impacts you, decision makers and officers in the fire service, representing agencies big and small. In this podcast, you'll hear from industry experts, national leaders, and local fire chiefs who are out there making a difference every single day. I'm Tom Jenkins, Senior Advisor and Research Manager for the UL Fire Safety Research Institute, a former fire chief for the city of Rogers, Arkansas, and a former IAFC president.
And I'm Joe Powers, the Managing Director of IAFC's consulting firm, Emergency Services Consulting International. We're glad you're here. This podcast is designed for you and for the fire and emergency services community.
Before we dig into this week's important and interesting topic, be sure to review our library of episodes at iafc.org/podcast and listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you like the content, help us by sharing it. It can make our profession better.
Today we have a great friend of the fire service who has likely one of the most interesting backgrounds. He attended the Fire Academy in Montgomery County, Maryland. He was a past fire commissioner in Washington State. He actually worked closely with Alan Brunacini, and he's a retired Disney executive. He also sits on the board for the Center for Public Safety Excellence. Over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to talk to Ben about many topics. However, I think one of the most interesting topics that he brings to the table is the topic of fire service branding. So welcome, Ben May, to the iCHIEFS podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here.
Yeah. So as a firefighter, to your core, as I've always understood you as a firefighter to your core, what brought you into the area of fire service branding, fire service marketing? How did that happen?
Thanks for asking. Interesting story. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and had just gotten out of rookie school, actually, in Montgomery County, Maryland. And at the time, Warren Isman was the fire chief in Fairfax County. He was also the foremost authority on hazmat in the country. And he had been in Montgomery County. And I had a chance to meet with him for different reasons. And he told me, listen to my story. And I said, I just want to make a contribution to the fire service as much as I possibly can. And he said, I think you could be a fire officer. There's no question about that. I'd done really well in rookie school. I was first in my class. And this is before I became fire commissioner. And he said, you have somewhat of a marketing background from what I can tell from some of the things you've been doing. And people don't know what we do. They don't have a clue. And people don't support things that they don't understand. They don't support it politically, and they don't support it economically or financially. You could do a great service to us if you could somehow convince people or show people who we are, what we represent, what our service is all about. Because I can guarantee you they don't know. And so I asked him, I said, well, what would I do? And he said, well, you might want to be a PIO. And at that time, I was so ignorant, I had to ask him what a PIO was. And I tried that route. It didn't work out too well. And so I went back to Montgomery County College, and I had an independent research project, and I called it Fire Service Marketing Management. And I put together a kind of a syllabus and an expertise. And I called Harvey Eisner at Firehouse Magazine, and I asked him if he would let me write a column called Marketing ICS. And after a number of months and, convincing him finally, he says, yeah, go ahead. And so for 15 years, I had a column, and I started to write about it. And then I would, go to Firehouse Expo, and, maybe 5 people would show up for my seminar, a couple of chiefs. And then when I got transferred to Seattle, Washington, I got a phone call from a guy that I really admire to this day. His name was Jim Davis, Chief Jim Davis. And he called me up and he said, hey, I got a proposition for you. I said, okay. He said, how'd you like to be fire commissioner? And I I took a big gulp and I said, Chief, I don't think I'm qualified to be fire commissioner. He goes, oh, yes, you are. He says, I never seen anybody that loves the fire service as much as I do, besides you. And he said, you know business and you know marketing, and you could really help us. And so it was like I kind of died and went to heaven, I guess you might say. And I mean, I put everything I had into it. So much so that at the end of my stint, I didn't want to be in private enterprise anymore. And there was a possibility of being with the NFPA, but after 5 interviews, they still weren't sure what to do with me. And one of the guy there, his name was, I can't remember his last name. He was a former general in the Joint Chiefs. And after 5 interviews, he says, you tend to favor the fire service a lot. And we're all kinds of fire protection, not just the fire service. And I said, General, that's not true. I said, I'm not that dense, He says, I just still can't make up my mind. Well, I said, sir, I have to make up my mind because I need a job. And so one of my mentors and dearest friends, he's like a brother to me, a guy named Lee Cockrell, called me up and he says, hey, why don't you come on over to Disney? And when I got to Disney, my boss, I became manager of business development at Epcot. That was my first job. And they asked me, what are you passionate about? And I said, well, that's easy, fire department. What could you do with it? And I said, what do you mean? What could I do with it? He said, well, safety is Disney's #1 value. If you can give us an idea and you can get it funded, not with Disney money, we just might build an attraction dedicated to your passion. How's that? I couldn't believe it. And so I went bonkers, and I started calling people up and eventually got Liberty Mutual to give us quite a chunk of change. And we created something called Where's the Fire, which was the largest public fire education experience in the country. I think it was in the world at the time. And it was there for, I can't even remember how long, 7 years, 8 years, something. Millions of people came through there. And so, after that, I got to work with the folks at IFSTA and help them with their marketing. Dave Paulison was, with USFA at the time. And so I worked with them, always in a sort of consultative capacity. Disney they let me go crazy. They said, hey, as long as you can do your job here, you just go at it, very supportive people. And so I worked with them, worked with Randy Bruggeman, helped him write a chapter in his latest administration book on marketing. And one thing just led to the other. And Disney kept asking me, what else are you passionate about? And I said, well, I'm from Oklahoma. I kind of like severe weather, meteorology. So they said, well, what could you do? And so I put together another one and another one and another one, and it started mounting up. And so I got promoted and then got promoted again and kept working, with the fire service as well. And then they sent me to Paris to lead the team over there. And then I decided to retire. And then I got on the board with CPSC, and, that's kind of what I do. I do a lot of different things with the fire service.
It sounds like you're horrible at retirement. So congratulations on that.
It's so funny. People say that a lot.
Yeah.
People say that a lot, but I don't really wear that as a badge of courage or whatever you might call it. It's really not that. I don't do that much, to tell you the truth. I just try to do where I can contribute, and not and where I can't contribute, try to find somebody else that can.
Well, something that you said really interests me. You mentioned working with IFSTA as another fellow Oklahoman. That resonates. And when you think of the topics that you are a subject matter expert in as it relates to the fire service, I'm curious, what are we missing in this business from your perspective, having worked in private industry, and you love the fire service? That's so evident. When it comes to marketing and telling our story, where are we missing out, and what do we need to be doing as an industry?
Wow, great question. Well, I don't know that I have the answer. I might have the strategy, but not necessarily the answer. I think if we go back and we talk about the term brand, branding, what is a brand? if you take a look at the Maltese Cross and you think about what it means, and you think about what it means to the average citizen, especially today, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I don't know if you've ever read this quote by Kurt Vonnegut. He said, the best symbol he could ever think of man's humanity to man is a fire truck. And that's really what it's all about. The Pew Research folks did a study many years ago, and the name of the study was called "Who Do You Trust?" And people trust the fire service second only to their immediate family. So when you think about a brand and you think about trust and you think about the Disney brand and what people think about that brand, and then you think about the fire department, they let us come into their home. They trust us immediately with their lives. That's a big deal. And you said, well, what's missing? What's missing is a marketing plan. What's missing is a specific plan by department to show people who we are and what we do. Now, the chief can do that. The PIO can do that. But what it really comes down to is the individual firefighter. And I've met a lot of firefighters in my day. I can remember one, we were out on a call one time in Woodinville, Washington, and we were having some things going on at the department, and, it's a little bit of chaos, not too bad. And I remember telling one lieutenant, I said, listen, don't worry, everything's going to be cool. We got it under control. You don't need to worry about a thing. And he goes, oh, Commissioner, I don't worry about stuff like that. He says, the only thing I worry about is I can't come back twice and be a firefighter twice, So firefighters love being firefighters. They love doing the job, but they don't necessarily have a marketing brain to do it. And unfortunately, if you don't have a marketing brain, you may not have a job. So you need to think about it that way. It's difficult to bring in recruits now. Remember the days when there were, when I took the test, it was wrapped around the school, to go, lines wrapped around the school, spending the night, to go in to take the test. That's not that way anymore. And we have to understand why that is, why it is. And so we need to develop a plan that has to do with attraction. And what is it about the fire service? And a lot of people are confused today. A lot of young people, they're hurting, they're depressed because they don't know which way to go. And I always found for me that the fire service was a way to go, that I knew from when I was a little kid. My parents used to fight a lot. I always run down to the firehouse. Once I walked into the firehouse, I knew I was going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay. I was safe. And if you think about it, that sometimes you'll see this emblem outside of a firehouse and it has hands together and it says safe place, safe place. That's what people are looking for. And that's what we offer to people, safe place. It doesn't matter what happened with us in our particular day. We have the responsibility to take care of people 24/7. And, low acuity calls, by the way, that's your opportunity. That's the opportunity to really show people who you are. Because instead of, bitching, oh, I got to go out on this thing again, no, that's not it at all. First of all, you get to show people what you're all about. You get to put your arms around people and say, listen, I'm here for you no matter what. No matter what. If you read the Declaration of Independence, it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We protect the first right, life, so the citizens can enjoy the other two. That's a big responsibility. And it's not for everybody, So need a plan, I work with CPSC, obviously, and when we do community risk reduction, that's a big deal. So let's talk about that for a minute. Community risk reduction began through, it has its beginnings in England, in Merseyside, England, by a fire chief named Tony McGurk. Tony came in, it was a mess, poverty-stricken, multi-ethnic. He was in the middle of a strike of the firefighters, and he pulled together this idea where he would bring in people from different ethnicities, and he put them in a uniform, and he have them go into their apartments and their houses and check for hazards. By doing that, he lowered the fire problem within the first 6 months, almost to eradicate it within a year. But what he also found was he found drug problems, he found broken homes, he found all kinds of issues. So he started to try to deal with those. By the time he finished, he had an amazing area that he had completely supported through that community risk reduction, and he was knighted by the Queen for it. So that then transferred over to us when we were with Vision 2020. The one thing we got out of Vision 2020 was community risk reduction. And the reason it's so important from a branding perspective is this. Maybe you've heard the term positioning. Positioning is the position of the brand in the mind of the consumer. So the positioning of the fire service is, safety, care, whatever it might be. Disney is going to be, good times, fun-loving family, whatever it might be. Every brand has a particular kind of a positioning theory. Well, if you ever have to go head-to-head, you don't want to go head-to-head with a brand. You want to do what I call surround and drown. So what I mean by that is if you look at the car companies, all these car companies are going, what is their point of differentiation? And they slice it and they dice it and they say, well, we're different. We're Tesla. This is why we're different. We're Chevrolet. We're different. With the fire service, you say, well, what do firefighters do? Well, they put out fires. Well, not necessarily. They do a lot of things, right? You'd think the public knows that only 4% of what we do is put fires out. They don't know that. So what do they do? Community risk reduction. We do EMS. We do, I think there's about 16 different things, right? But the cool thing about community risk reduction is it's everything. The cops don't do it. We do it, right? The hospitals don't do it. We do. So if you got a problem, well, Joe knows this better than I do. You got a problem, you just call us and we'll figure out what to do. Well, what does that do? It positions the fire department as the first and last authority to help you out. And it strengthens our brand. I don't know what to do, but I know if I call the fire department, they'll know what to do. I don't care what it is. That's why Brunacini's book about customer service, it's as relevant today as it was back then. The guy was a genius. I mean, there's no question about it. He had actually, if you really probe into that piece, because I looked at the galley, he gave me the galley proof. In the back of it, he has a specific position, which is the only thing that firefighter does or officer does. He takes care of the people in the house or the situation, and that's it. He gets a Red Cross. He gets the insurance. Now, granted, if you're a smaller department, it's hard to do. But if you can do that, it could be an extension of the PIO. You just never know. Let me get back to another thing you asked me about, or to answer your question. The PIO has been in the past, kind of like, okay, Lieutenant, you're going to be a PIO for the year, and then you're going to rotate on to something else, right? That's changing. It's changing before our eyes right now. What we've done at CPSC, we now have a credential for a PIO. And we now have people in officer positions that are PIOs. One of them is a tremendous guy and one you may want to talk to. His name is Forrest Smith. Forrest Smith is assistant chief in Mesa, Arizona there with Mary Camelli. And we had him at the CPSC conference. He is dynamic and was a dynamic speaker, and his sole deal is community risk reduction and public information. And he's a chief doing it. And that's going to be the trend. That's going to be the trend now as it goes. And so that is a destination position. And, you say, well, should it be a firefighter or should it be a civilian? It depends. Spokane Valley, Washington just got the Brueggemann Award. That's our award that we give for most innovative programs at CPSC. And the woman who does is a woman named Julie Happy, and she's civilian, but she is totally committed. So it really depends on the individual. What I don't think works is when you bring in a marketing head and they're kind of like, yeah, okay, and then they have to get to know the fire service, and they're either, they're kind of an add-on as opposed to being a visceral part of it. And you have to really live it to know it. You have to, you know what it's like to be committed, you know? Some people say we should be committed, but that's another story. The point is that when you're committed to something like this, you're going to do it. You're going to do whatever it takes, no matter what.
So as we start to wrap this up, one of the things that I wanted to understand a little bit more. So from a chief officer standpoint, sitting, maybe going to work, listening to this podcast, driving down the road, really it's okay, we've got this great brand. We've had a great brand for a very long time. So what? I mean, it's the fire service. Everybody's always going to trust us. But, when you talk about, in the market, two brands are going head to head. What's the threat to the fire services brand? Why is it that we need to focus on that brand? And why do we need to continue to build it, continue to communicate what we do to our community?
You ever heard of Kodak?
I used to know what Kodak was.
Yeah, you used to know. That's why. If you don't keep the brand, if you don't think you can lose, if you don't think you can go out of business, think again. Go to Denmark and ask about Falk, which took over their entire fire protection business, private enterprise, right? What about Rural Metro? What are they doing? Haven't heard much about them the other day. Now and again, you'll see an article in the Wall Street Journal and say, what do firefighters do anyway? Because they don't put fires out anymore. You have to be that's why this taking responsibility for a positive public perception from you guys is so important. People don't have a clue. Even to this day, they don't, with social media and everything. And we're trying really hard too. You know that, Joe, with the data, with community risk reduction and all those kinds of things. But if you say to your firefighters, if you think you're going to stay in business, you better think again. And the idea that's like, I don't do pub ed because, it's not like a knockdown. Well, guess what, George? You took an oath. What did the oath say? You'll do whatever it takes to do to be a firefighter. That's an oath. Other people, Disney, don't take oaths. People in private enterprise don't take oaths. Okay. You're not a for-profit organization. People don't look at your bottom line in that way. Okay. The public has had it with private enterprise to a great degree. You're going to sell me something else. Do you know that the average American has the attention span of a gnat because they're constantly getting bombarded by, those things. We're the clear message that we are here to care for you. And that's the God's truth. That's why we're here. And people need that. They want it. I'll tell you real quick story as you're wrapping up here. I went out on a call one night in Phoenix. And there was a guy he was a young guy and he was in a diabetic stupor. And we got him packaged up and ready to go back. We took one engine company in an aid car. And his mother was crying. She's beside herself, right? And we're trying to console her. And she looked up at this captain who was running the engine. And she goes, could I just have a hug? And the guy goes, sure. That's all she needed, When people see firefighters on, and not in an emergency, they look at it, well, at least I do. They look at it and it's like, wow, everything's going to be okay now. It's going to be okay. They know what to do. Now, maybe they say what's wrong. I don't know. But more than likely, it's going to be okay. And that's what you represent every single day. It's going to be okay. And granted, you have your own issues. When we're at Disney, we used to say, we will do what needs to be done for the guest, no matter what, because we're on stage. That's why they call us cast members, right? When you're a firefighter, when you check in, you're on. And that's it. You just have to let the other shit go. And you have to take care of business. And I don't care what it is. And the least call is as important as the largest call every single time. And if you do that, you'll be okay. And the other part of it is the idea that's like, well, I don't do that. I didn't sign up for this. What did you sign up for? What did you take the oath for? You're going to do whatever it takes, period. Doesn't matter. You're a firefighter. You'll do whatever it takes. Those guys that went into 9/11, God bless them. You think they didn't go, I don't know if I want to do this. I didn't sign up for this. Think about that. You don't have to do that now, but what you did sign up for was to take that oath, and that means you're going to protect the public no matter what.
Well, I love your passion. And as we wrap up, kind of a Joe and Tom tradition is we always try to kind of give fire chiefs and our listeners an opportunity to learn a little bit more. And so if I'm a fire chief in one of the 27,000 fire departments across the United States, then where would I go for more information? If I buy into what you're talking about, I want to know what I can do in my department, and give me an elevator speech as to where I would turn as a fire chief.
Okay, I will. Hold up. Can I show you? Can I grab something here?
I think we have to now. I don't think we have a choice. I think you have to show us.
All right. This is one of those deals where it's kind of like, I'm glad you asked me that question, right? This would be one place to start. This is Randy Brugman's Advanced Fire and Emergency Services Administration, right? Chapter 10. Chapter 10, Creating the Value for Fire and Emergency Services. We wrote that chapter together. I took everything that I just told you about fire service marketing management, and I put it into this. I was going to write a book with IFSA, but I was too busy with Disney. So it's in there. That's where I would start. That's where I would start. And I guess the other part of it would be, and this is, again, I said it before, but I think it's really important. The individual firefighter has the responsibility of doing that to the public, because the chief can't do it by himself. They need to understand that.
Well, we've learned a lot today from our guest, Ben May. Ben has been, if there's nothing else that you have done correct, it's that you've brought a topic that is not talked about enough, and you're still passionate about it after a long and very productive and gainful career. So on the behalf of the fire service, thanks for what you've done for us. And on the behalf of the iCHIEFS podcast series, thank you for being our guest today. I certainly enjoyed having you.
Thanks, Tom and Joe. I really, really appreciate it.
To our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening. This show's not possible without you. If you're a fan of the show, please take some time, and wherever you get this podcast, please leave us a review. Until next time, we hope you stay safe. Look forward to many new episodes of the iCHIEFS podcast series later this year. Thank you.